To Phil Dixon's December 9th, 2025 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And I'm not going to be here long today, still working my way through a cold. So if you like what I'm doing here, guys, go ahead and subscribe. I'm probably not going to say that again, but maybe I will at the end of the broadcast. Subscribers are coming right in. So we're not going to waste any of your time, but we're going to go ahead and give you some facts because there's some things I want to talk about today that I think are important. So we're looking at December the 9th. All right, so let's go immediately to December the 9th, 1930. Andrew Root Foster, renowned pitcher, team owner, Negro National League president, died in Kankakee, Illinois. And you're probably wondering why I'm wearing this hat. Well, I'm wearing this hat in honor of Ruth Foster because Ruth Foster wore caps like this all the time. So when he was away from the ball field. So I'm wearing mine today as well in honor of this legendary uh, baseball great. There's so many things I can say about Ruth Foster. He is certainly, he should have, first of all, I will say this. He should have been the first baseball player of African American ancestry to be in the Hall of Fame. He was that monumental, and he was a pioneer. Of course, we know that Satchel Paige was the first. I'm glad Satchel Paige made it in. Maybe they should have both made it in at the same time. Jackie Robinson even made it in before Andrew Root Foster. So just letting you know that, yeah, sometimes in the Hall of Fame, they end up taking care of guys who had some kind of connection to Major League Baseball, being the American National League, quicker than they do of these guys who are pure Negro League baseball players. So Ruth Foster had the honor over the years of knowing his family. I had many conversations with his daughter-in-law, who was married to his son Earl, and her name was Doris. Doris was a big supporter of mine. Went to the house many times. We had lots of conversations, and just was involved with the family all the time. So, yeah. So actually, I knew her. Also, when I first connected with Doris, Earl had just passed away, so this might have been like 1982, maybe 83, somewhere in there. And Geneva, Ruth Foster's younger sister, was also alive at that time. So I talked to Geneva on many occasions. And let's see, boy, went to the house. He lived off of Michigan Avenue. He lived in a apartment building. And of course, after he built this, had this apartment building, I don't know if he built it or purchased it, but he did not purchase a home. He wanted this apartment building. And he and his wife, Sarah, were considered some of the black elite in Chicago. So, because I have so much on Ruth Foster, I thought I would pull something out that might resonate with you this morning. And this is one that I think that you might find interesting. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I had it right here. Okay, so I wanted to know more about Ruth Foster because he passed away at the mental institution in Kankakee, Illinois. And when I was talking to Geneva, she told me that her ex-husband, who was living in St. Louis at that time, used to drive him down there all the time. His name was Alton Davis. And so I said, hey, I'm going to call Alton. She gave me the number. And so when I called Alton, this was back, he was still alive in 1993. And no, I take that back. Alton, I think, was Ruth Foster's nephew that she gave me this information. So, but he had lived in Chicago and he would take Sarah down to visit Rube. So, thinking that one of these days I might get to a doctor and I can describe what Rube's symptoms were, and maybe they can tell me what he was suffering from. So, I began to ask questions of Alton, who watched him every time he took Sarah down there. And he said that and this is his actual words. He said Rube was very calm. He wasn't always aware of his environment. And he and Mr. Foster would walk on the grounds, and he would ask about certain individuals that they knew together. And he was fairly rational. And he said sometimes he would be quiet, so he would just stop talking and just stare. into space. So he had lost a lot of his original weight, and he thought, and Alton thought the condition was terminal, which it ended up being terminal. And Alton also mentioned he had a very commanding voice, and he was very dedicated to his professionalism. And so those are just a few things. I do have more on that interview I had with Alton. And also, yeah, Rube Foster. I would say, guys, if you know something about Rube Foster, go look him up. All right. And then I have some people joining me today. I always ask people who put in your city that you're coming from, and somebody has a St. Paul, Minnesota. Certainly appreciate that. Then we have somebody from India. Wow, you're going to learn a little bit about American history today. So anyway, Rube Foster. I will say this too. Now everybody knows, if you follow my broadcast, you know that I am a African American Episcopal Church member, and so was Sarah. Sarah went to the African American Church there in Chicago, and that's where they had her funeral as well. And so let's see, what else do I have? I want to mention on Foster. Well, but so many things I could talk about. I could spend a whole broadcast, and I think what I will do real soon before Christmas, because this was sixth in 1968 in St. Paul, Minnesota. So you might want to look that up. Leroy Matlock, a great pitcher, was raised in Moberly, Missouri. That's where it was. All right. Okay, so I just want to mention that I'm going to come back to Rube Foster, not today, but I just want to let you know that this is the time we need to celebrate this outstanding guy who played. And I will tell you what, you will look on the baseball records online. So if you look at Rube Foster's 1907 pitching record, you won't find these numbers. So I'm going to give you numbers that I compiled myself, all right? Okay, 1907, Rube Foster pitching for the Chicago Leland Giants, won 31 games. And he lost, actually, he participated in 31, won 28, lost 4. He started 28 games and finished 27 of those games, pitched 226 innings, allowed, let's see, he allowed 150 hits, and also he struck out 172 batters and walked 40. So he didn't walk a lot of people. He was just a dominating pitcher, Rube Foster, and he only hit 5 men all year. So he wasn't a wild pitcher. He very controlled and finesse pitcher. But in 1905, he won almost 40 games. And so, but these are things that I talk about but Rube Foster, and that's just a couple of his years. Just imagine how many games this guy won from the time he left Texas in 1902 to when he really stopped pitching regularly, which is about 1911. He didn't go as regular in 1911. So in a 10-year span, this guy probably won maybe 400 games, and we just don't give him that recognition. Great pitcher. He is in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, not as a baseball player, but as a baseball, we must say administrator, or something like that. Man, this guy should be in there. First and foremost, is one of the greatest pitchers of the first 10 years of the 20th century. That's Andrew Rube Foster. You can quote me on that one. And one of these days, very soon this month, I'm going to come back and really go into some detail on Foster, why I think that he's so great. All right. So if you come in into this broadcast, be sure and put in your city that you're listening from. Also, if you look in the back there's a picture of Rube Foster that I keep in my background many times. And so, Andrew Rube Foster. Okay. All right. So let's go to December the 9th, 1952. And Abe Manley, owner of the Newark Eagles, died in Germantown, Pennsylvania. And he was born in Hertford, not Hartford, Hertford, North Carolina. And let's see, I will say this. Now, you probably heard of his wife because she's more famous, but he should be famous too. Somebody's looking at me from Wichita, but lived in Wichita. Yes, I go to Wichita, Kansas all the time. Know that city very well. Somebody says, "Rest in peace, Joe Rogan." What's interesting is I never called him Joe Rogan. His name is Wilbur Rogan, or maybe Wilbur Bullet Rogan. And the reason I don't do that, guys, I'm just going to go backwards for a moment here because I'm looking at this, is because they tried to make these ball players pocketbook versions of white players. And there was a guy named Bullet Joe Bush, and they tried to I guess you might say, corner Bullet Rogan's history and make him Bullet Joe Rogan. And the truth of the matter is, the black newspapers here in Kansas City, the Call newspapers primarily, never used Joe Rogan. They use Bullet or Wilbur Bullet Rogan. And so you have the black newspaper looking at it one way and the white paper looking at it another way. Isn't that interesting? And I chronicle that in my book, Wilbur Bullet Rogan and the Kansas City Monarchs. I try to prove that, but if you go to his Hall of Fame plaque, I think it does say Joe Rogan. But guys, that was the white name that they gave him. It was not the name that the black community gave him. He was Wilbur Bullet Rogan, and that Wilbur was spelled Wilber. Okay, so you're talking about another Joe Rogan. Hey, but you know what? What's interesting is I have seen white personalities like Joe Rogan, and there was another one named Jack Johnson. I think he was a singer that had these same names that they would use, and they were black baseball players' names, but most people would know those names quicker than they would know the names of the black baseball players. So interesting. All right, then. All right, so let's keep on going. Okay. All right, so Abraham Manley, he married on June 15, 1933. He married Effa Manley, and they reportedly had met at the 1932 World Series. Now, they say the World Series, I'm going to think that it was the American National League World Series, but I'm not for sure. I'm going to dig a little deeper on that one, but that's according said when they met, and within a year after that meeting, they were married, actually less than a year. And there is rumors that Effa Manley was white, passing as black. And of course, she is today a member of the Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame, the only woman enshrined in Cooperstown. And so she is still filled with some controversy, and that's Effa Manley. And so you can look this stuff up. I don't make it up. I just pay attention to it. All right? Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to spend just a little more time on this one, and we're going to get out here by 20 minutes. And remember, this is the December 9th edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. All right, then. So in a 3-for-1 trade, the Cincinnati Reds traded Frank Robinson to the Baltimore Orioles for two pitchers, Milt Pappas and Jack Balscom, and outfielder Dick Simpson. Now, how did that work out? Boy. Now, I was a kid following baseball at that time, and I knew that Hank Bauer, who ended up being a good friend of mine, was a big booster of mine. Hank Bauer was the manager of the Orioles, and man, I just loved Hank. I used to sit and talk to Hank all the time, and Hank would give me great stories. I remember one story that Hank told me. Hank had played with the New York Yankees, and he was with the New York Yankees when Elster Howard joined the team. And he said one day Casey Stengel was the manager of the Yankees, called a team meeting. So everybody came in thinking it was something real serious. And so he called the team meeting. Everybody's crowded around listening to what Casey had to say. And Casey said, he said, Elster Howard is the first black Yankee. And he said, I just want to know how we got the slowest black guy in the whole entire league. And he was talking about Elster Howard. Now, what's interesting about that, Hank told me this about this meeting that they had, and they got a chuckle and, they walked away. And he told me about this meeting years later. And I said, I never really paid much attention to Elster Howard's stolen bases. I said, was he slow? He said, oh, was he slow? He was real slow. So I remember I called Connie Johnson right then. Connie Johnson had played with the Monarchs and a few other teams, Baltimore and the White Sox. And so I called Connie Johnson on the telephone right after talking to Hank. I'm still at the stadium after Hank had told me that. And I said, hey, Connie, I said, was Elston Howard really slow? He said, I don't remember him being slow as far as a base runner. So I said, okay then. But when I got home, I got my Macmillan Encyclopedia out. And sure enough, Hank Bauer was right. Elston Howard, in his long baseball career, stole 8 bases. All right? That's not a lot of bases. This guy was on base for a lot. And he ended up winning the 1964 American League MVP. Elston Howard did. And just in case you didn't know this, Elston Howard also is the one who gets credit for inventing the batting weight, the little donut you put on the baseball bat. That was Elston Howard. So if you've ever played baseball and you have that donut, guys, you're partaking in a little bit of black baseball history, okay? All right then. Okay, so here we go. That's Elston Howard. So how did that trade work out? Well, it worked out great for Baltimore because they ended up going to the World Series and they beat the Dodgers in the World Series. And Frank Robinson became American League MVP. He also won the Triple Crown with a 316 average, 49 home runs, 122 RBIs. And how about this, guys? It was a rare total, but he scored 122 runs, 122 RBIs, 122 runs. Worked out real good for the Orioles, right? How about this? The guys that went to Cincinnati, Milk Pappas, and I've seen his name in many trivia games about him being traded for Frank Robinson. He finished the year with, he won 12 games and lost 11, posting a 4.429 ERA. And also Balscom, he pitched in 42 games, primarily as a long reliever. And he won 1 game while losing 5 and had a 5.49 ERA. In case you are not a baseball fan, that means if the ERA is the average amount of runs they will allow in a game while they're pitching. Okay, earned run average. Okay, and then Simpson was used primarily as a pinch runner and a defensive replacement. And Simpson appeared in 92 games with only 20 hits and batted .238. Now you got Frank Robinson batted .316. So you have a 3-for-1 trade, guys, and it worked out great. Unfortunately, the Cincinnati ownership or management or whatever, they thought Frank Robinson was on the downside of his career because he was nearing age 30. Had a chance to meet Frank Robinson on many, many occasions, especially after he started managing. And the last time I actually saw him, he was managing the Orioles. And I went down in the clubhouse because I used to be assistant director of public relations for the Kansas City Royals. And before then, I was also a freelance sports writer. So I always had access to go into the clubhouse. So I go down to the clubhouse, and I remember 2 things about that meeting. Let me take a drink of water real quick. I remember somebody on the Orioles had a great night, but when the room opened and the reporters could come in, everybody went over to Cal Ripken. And I remember Frank Robinson hollering across the room, "That's the guy you should be interviewing, the guy who had the great night." It was a black guy. I can't remember who it was, but they were interviewing Cal Ripken. They weren't even paying attention to this guy who had a fantastic night in defeating the Kansas City Royals. I remember that because he was not restricted in saying what he felt about how baseball was covered, and that gave me a lot of energy. It put a lot of energy in me because I'm looking at this and say, hey, you know what? These guys, some of these guys are out here telling the truth, right? Okay, and I had watched the game, so I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I remember, I don't know if it was that day or another time, because back then, the Eastern teams would come into Kansas City twice. So the way they had it now, they just come once. But back then, they would come twice, and then you would go to their field twice. So it could have been another occasion, because I went down every time the Orioles came, and I would talk to Elrod Hendrick all the time. So I had written an article for the Kansas City Call, and in that article, I had compared Frank Robinson is a modern day Andrew Rue Foster. That's kind of interesting. And I'm talking about Foster and Robinson again here. So I was comparing him to that. Now, I knew Frank Robinson did not sign autographs. He had quit signing autographs. So, but I had a magazine. Actually, it was a yearbook from Puerto Rico when he had managed down there. And so I wanted that sign. So I go down there and I present Frank with this article. We talk about the article and stuff he reads. He said, "Oh man, I love this article." He was kind of vibing on the fact that I compared him to Rube Foster, and he was learning about Rube Foster from things I said. And then I said the magic word. I say, "Frank, I know you don't sign autographs, but can you please sign this magazine for me? This yearbook. It's a yearbook." And so I said, "Can you please sign this for me?" And he looked at me. He said, "I knew this was going to cost me something," and he signed it. And I have that in my collection today from Frank Robinson. So, guys, that's a little bit of baseball history that happened on December the 9th. Of course, this is my December the 9th, 2025 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. I want to thank you for joining me. And somebody said, where do you get a hat like this? Well, you can go online and buy them. This one, I can't remember where I got it from. There are different hat shops around Kansas City that specialize in all kinds of hats. So that's where I used to pick this one up. And whenever I talk about Rube Foster, I like to put it on because it kind of takes me back. And of course, when I was a kid, I had what they called a teenager. I had what they called a Big Apple, which was this was in the 70s, and the Big Apple went out about this far. If you go and look at the Lockers, who were the dancers back in the 70s, they had the Big Apple. Somebody knows about the Big Apple. They were black, and they might have other colors in there. And I had a Big Apple. You can't find the Big Apple anymore, and unfortunately, mine is gone. So it didn't last through the ages. But I had a Big Apple hat. This one is just a normal. The Big Apple was, it was like a big wide hat, right? So you wore that to school, man. You were really something. So anyway, guys, that's a bit for me. I do want to thank everybody for joining. If you like what I'm doing here, go ahead and subscribe. We're still building up subscribers, and I appreciate your support. And guys, if you love baseball like I love baseball, come on, guys. This is a great place to be. All right. And I just want to invite you back again, and we'll be back again to do another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. The next one coming up is going to be I'll probably do it later today. That would be my December the 10th edition. All right. Thank you. I've got some good stuff on this one. This is incredible. Some of the things I have on that one. All right. Okay. Thank you, guys. You have a nice day, and we will see you real soon. Be sure and subscribe. Bye.